The early morning sun spilled through the front window, soft gold glancing off the simple living room. Framed photographs lingered on every surface, snapshots of birthday parties, 4th of Julys, a beaming young man in pressed army fatigues, boots just barely touching the ground. Jim Pearson traced his thumb over the edge of one such photo. His boy, Mark, jaw set with that slight hint of a smirk only he could pull off when he was trying to hide his nerves. Jim could see the ghost of that look every time he closed his eyes. Now the house felt bigger than it ever had. Quieter, too. Sometimes Jim caught himself listening for footsteps, for the creak of a bedroom door, the slam of the fridge at midnight. But those sounds were memories now, echoing in a place that didn't know how to let go. On the second Sunday after Mark's funeral, Jim woke before sunrise with purpose simmering in his veins. The grief that weighed on him had become a strange, stubborn strength. Today he'd put up that flagpole Mark always talked about, a real one, tall and solid, the kind to make the stars and stripes dance in the morning wind. He carried the pole out across the front lawn, measuring, careful. The grass was still wet with dew, and Jim's boots left dark imprints behind. He wiped his nose on his sleeve and knelt, starting to dig. The sky turned pink as he worked. Birds chattered in the hedges. Neighbors drove slowly by, curiosity etched on their faces. Mrs. Abernathy called out from across the street, her cane waving in the air. "Looks good, Jim." Her husband saluted as he shuffled out to fetch the paper. When the pole finally stood steady, proud, Jim heard a voice behind him. "You sure about that?" asked a man in pressed khakis and a powder blue polo. His sunglasses glinted and his badge read HOA Board. Jim wiped sweat from his brow. "It's what Mark wanted," he said. The man's jaw ticked. He fingered his clipboard. "Just make sure you check your covenants," he muttered, tapping the board with a plasticky click. Jim didn't respond. He stared up at the pole, heart numb and swelling all at once. He pictured Mark grinning, saying, "Looks good, Pops." But even as Jim finally tugged the flag's grommet onto the halyard and sent red, white, and blue climbing high, he felt eyes watching. Curtains twitched. Engines idled a beat too long. The neighborhood, usually so peaceful, felt suddenly charged, expectant, like the calm before a storm. That night, as the wind snapped at the flag, Jim caught sight of a man in a suit standing in the dark, jotting something down on a clipboard. Jim's gut twisted. He couldn't shake the sense that something bigger had just shifted. He wondered briefly if he should have waited, if Mark would have handled it differently. But then he remembered the silence of the empty house and the promise he'd made beside a modest gravestone. "Not a day will go by that I don't honor you." A faraway rumble, maybe thunder, maybe something closer, hung in the humid air. Jim flicked off the porch light, unsure whether tomorrow brought comfort or trouble. Neighbor after neighbor stared at the flagpole with a mix of pride, fear, and something else Jim couldn't name. All he knew was that this wasn't the end of anything. It was only the beginning. The slap of envelopes on the doormat jarred Jim awake. He shuffled down the hallway, knees aching. The morning after seemed thicker than before. The mail sat in a neat pile, credit card offer, grocery flyer, and a plain white envelope with a sharp HOA logo in the corner. He hesitated, thumb tracing the edge. Something about the official stamp, the heavy cream paper, not junk, not a bill. He tore it open, pulse drumming behind his ears. "Dear Mr. Pearson, we have observed a non-compliant structure installed in your front yard in violation of the community's unified aesthetic code. Please remove the flagpole within 48 hours to avoid enforcement actions." His hands tightened, crumpling the letter. Non-compliant? That wasn't a structure. It was a tribute, a promise. He stared at the lines again, head swimming with the clean, lawyered language: remove, violations, action to be taken. He carried the letter to the kitchen, hands shaking. The fridge word clock ticked. Jim's gaze flicked to Mark's photograph over the sink. He reread the letter once, twice. Did they know? Did they care? Would any of them dare to knock and ask why? Soon his phone rang, unknown number. "Hello?" Jim's voice was rough, unguarded. "Mr. Pearson, this is Lisa Mayers, secretary for the HOA. We need confirmation that the flagpole will be removed promptly. These are the guidelines we all agreed on. I know this is a difficult time, but the board cannot offer exceptions." Her tone was rehearsed, sympathy flattened by policy. Jim tried to explain, but she only replied, "Put it in writing. Send photos when it's done, please." As the call ended, he stood in the middle of his kitchen, the air goosebump cold despite the summer heat. He could almost hear Mark's voice. Figures they'd care more about the lawn than the meaning. With the flag outside flapping bravely in the breeze, Jim scribbled notes on a pad. He called the number at the bottom of the letter. No answer, just a pre-recorded message, breezy and unhelpful. That afternoon, neighbors stopped by one after the other. Some spoke in whispers, others barely made eye contact, but all of them saw the letter lying on the kitchen table. "Are they serious?" Jim's neighbor Carl muttered, brow furrowed. "Always are," Mrs. Abernathy replied. "HOAs don't back down. You know they fined the Smiths for their window boxes last year." Every story, every rumor, edged the air with something electric, resentment, but also the beginnings of a collective indignation. Still, the flagpole's fate loomed, the threat now in black and white. Before bed, Jim folded the letter with trembling hands and tucked it beneath Mark's photo. He stared long at the words till they blurred, wondering how many battles a broken heart could take. And then, as dark settled over the house, his phone hummed again, another message from the HOA, more urgent than before. The warning clock had started, but what would happen, Jim wondered, if he let it run out. The morning after the deadline, Jim blinked awake to a sharp, metallic clink against his mailbox. He shuffled outside, bare feet complaining against the pebbled walk. A bright orange slip fluttered in the breeze, taped to the mailbox flag. He peeled it off, heart dropping as he scanned the bold black letters. Notice of fine. $30 for today. And a note at the bottom, $30 per day until compliance. Immediate removal required. Jim's jaw tightened. He stood in the early light, the flag above snapping crisply against the blue sky. The pole gleamed, and yet the orange slip seemed to scorch the morning with its bravado. Who had taped it there so early? Had they watched from a car, waiting for the house to still? When Jim ducked inside, another envelope was already on his doormat. The same logo, but this one heavier. He opened it with even less care. Now the fines were official, logging the violation. A daily tally began to build, $30 today, $60 tomorrow, more if it continued. Jim set the slips on the counter, anger pulsing. He tried calling the HOA, no answer. He wrote back, "This flagpole is a memorial for my son who died serving his country. Please reconsider." He pressed send. Silence except another ping, another form letter. "We regret your loss, but community standards must be enforced." Motivation curdled into defiance. As he marched outside to mow the grass, making sure every blade stood upright, lest they nitpick the lawn too, he caught sight of his neighbor, Carl, watching from the porch. Carl gave a nod, small maybe, but Jim felt something shift. A show of solidarity. The day wore on, fines ticking upward. Every hour, Jim's nerves twisted tighter. Would they escalate? Would they send more threats? How far could paint-by-numbers bureaucracy be pushed when set against a father's grief? Evening dropped softly, the air thick as bathwater, cicadas buzzing. Jim spotted a car parked across the street, engine off but headlights pointed straight at his yard. Someone inside scribbled in a notebook. He snapped a photo with his phone, the resolution blurry but fury crystal clear. Inside, Jim lined up the fines on the table, one beside the other, each bright as a wound. He felt the ghost of Mark at his shoulder. "Don't back down," Mark might have said, voice low, insistent. But when the phone rang, another call from HOA enforcement, Jim let it go to voicemail. He couldn't face another empty apology followed by a demand. As night crept across the lawn, Jim stared at the glow of the flag under his porch light. The fines were just paper. The silence, though, was weightier. He texted Carl one defiant sentence, "I'm not taking it down." A minute later, Carl replied, "You shouldn't." But Jim had no idea how much further the HOA would go, or how many allies he truly had. Not yet. By the time Thursday rolled around, word had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire caught in dry grass. Jim was used to the solitude, used to grief, but something about the sight of strangers lingering on nearby sidewalks made him uneasy. In the early evening, with the air warm and buzzing, Mrs. Abernathy hobbled up his walkway, cane in hand, 2 brownies wrapped in tinfoil. "You hold strong, Jim. Mark was a good boy. Folks around here need a reminder of what matters." Her words carried beyond the gate. Carl stepped onto his own porch, arms crossed, nodding toward Jim with a sort of quiet authority. Moments later, the Rileys, parents with two little kids, dropped off a card, shyly touching Jim's elbow before slinking back to their house. As dusk fell, more neighbors wandered over. Each brought something small, a garden flower, a casserole, words voiced hesitantly. "It's not right. We're with you." One neighbor, Nadia, whispered, "My husband served too. We're behind you, Jim." He looked at their faces, old and young, some strangers until now. For months, the community had felt like a watercolor, soft, blurred boundaries. Now everything was in focus. A small group formed at the curb, holding little flags, hands tucked nervously into pockets. Someone raised their phone, snapping a photo of the gathering, posting it to the neighborhood Facebook page. Within minutes, the post filled with thumbs-ups, hearts, and comments. "Support Jim. Shame on the HOA." Sunset painted gold streaks across the west-facing homes. People lingered, voices quiet but urgent. Threats of fines, even of legal action, had drawn out more unity than any pancake breakfast ever could. Jim stood on his porch, overwhelmed by the outpouring. Loss pressed heavy against his chest, sorrow an ever-present ache, but tonight that ache mingled with gratitude. Nadia spoke up, voice clear. "We should do something. They can't fine everyone, can they?" The group murmured, not quite ready but hungry for a plan. In the distance, someone, likely a board member, stood watching with arms crossed, lips tight. The neighbor's curiosity had shifted. It was now resolve. Carl raised a flag of his own in his yard the next morning. Nadia followed. By noon, 5 more flags stood tall down the block, each one a quiet rebellion. Of course, the HOA noticed, and their next move would be anything but neighborly. For that night, standing amid support he never expected, Jim felt lighter. But as the crowd dispersed, 2 unfamiliar cars rolled slowly past, clipboard behind the wheel, eyes quietly judging. Jim locked his front door as dusk settled, wondering what would the board do next now that their control was slipping. Friday arrived with a thunderstorm rolling in, wind curling the flags, but never quite snatching them from their perches. Jim awoke to a fresh stack of orange and yellow fines on his mailbox, not just for him, but now stamped with new names. Carl, Nadia, even the Rileys. He rushed down the street, heart pounding. Every flagged house had its own violation notice taped to a door or fence, the same terse language repeated like a curse. The fines varied, some $30, some $50, citing repeat violation, as if loyalty was now a punishable offense. Murmurs swelled, people stood in little knots clutching the slips. Someone said, "This is harassment." Another muttered, "What are they going to do? Tow my house?" By midday, Lisa Mayers, the board secretary, called a special meeting in the community room. Her announcement was blunt. "We're receiving unwanted media attention regarding recent non-compliant displays. Under covenants, enforcement will be strictly applied." Her tone was brittle, no room for compromise. Posters went up. Mandatory removal of unauthorized flagpoles displays within 24 hours. Fines double after deadline. The board set up a small table outside the meeting, manned by an attorney in a sharp blue suit and 2 hired security guards. The message was loud. This would not be a friendly discussion. Jim entered, pulse throbbing. As he took a seat, he noted the stares from the board, cold, calculated. Lisa read from a prepared script, detailing Mark's story as an unfortunate personal matter, but reaffirming that emotions do not exempt one from community standards. The attorney stood and handed Jim a formal cease and desist, his voice rehearsed. Failure to comply may result in legal action, including property lien or foreclosure proceedings. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Carl's fist clenched around his own violation notice. Jim's blood ran cold, past anger now, somewhere between disbelief and fury. Was this what it meant to honor his son? To be dragged by his own neighbors, people who once waved each morning, into courtrooms and lawyers' offices? Lisa concluded, "Please direct all further communications to board legal counsel." Outside, Jim watched the rain slick over the flagpoles, washing the paint but not the resolve. Neighbors lingered, whispering. The threat was real. Fear took root alongside anger. After the meeting, an anonymous flyer appeared in every mailbox. "Stand up for your neighbor. Don't let the HOA win." No one claimed credit, but the block was waking up. Jim reread the legal threat. Property liens, courts, foreclosure in all caps. He slammed it on the table and stared at Mark's photo, voice shaking. "I'm not backing down." But deep down, he knew This was about more than a fine. Lines had been drawn, and the next move would decide everything. Were his neighbors ready to risk what they had left? Would he be fighting this alone after all, or was the board about to push things past the point of no return? Panic clawed at Jim as unfamiliar legal language popped up in his inbox. Intent to place lien, summary judgment, immediate cure required. He met with Carl and Nadia in the kitchen, the letter opened between them like a bomb. The words bled together. Your continued violation constitutes a breach of contract, subject to escalation in the form of property liens and, if necessary, pursuit of foreclosure. Nadia's hands shook as she read. This can't be real. They can't take your home, not for a flag. Carl stared at the ceiling, jaw grinding. They think they can. Jim felt the weight press in from every side. His mortgage, his reputation, even his memories of Mark. The board's escalation had shifted from fines to months-long consequences, threats that could unravel everything he'd built. He called the number on the lawyer's letter. Rings, voicemail. Please direct all communications through email. He left a message anyway, voice hoarse. This is a memorial, not a shed. I won't remove it. My neighbors stand with me. Please reconsider. That night, Facebook groups buzzed. Screenshots of board emails and legal threats fanned across the community page. Neighbors posted defenses, but other comments under aliases parroted the bylaws and threatened counter-lawsuits. The anxiety grew loud, pulsing behind each conversation. Carl muttered, "They're trying to scare us into folding." Nadia whispered, "What if it works?" At midnight, Jim stared out at the flag, harshly lit by the neighbor's security lamp. He thought of Mark training, serving, giving everything. To be threatened with the loss of home because of a pole and some fabric. Despair tangled with determination. Deep inside, though, unease lurked. Who among his neighbors would hold their nerve? The board had money and lawyers, the kind that could outweight, bankrupt, or simply crush opposition. But something else nagged at Jim. As he dug through the mailbox that night, he found a slip of paper crammed in the stack. Review Section 14 of the BYLAWS, scribbled in shaky capitals. No signature, no explanation. A clue, a trap. Could the very rules the board twisted so ruthlessly hide their own undoing? Jim slipped it into his pocket, mind racing, not sure whether hope or fear would win out. Either way, the board's next move felt less like law and more like war. Sleep was fitful, fractured by the endless whir of worst-case scenarios. Jim woke before dawn, the flag barely visible under bruised gray clouds. He poured a mug of bitter coffee and reread the mysterious note. Review Section 14 of the BYLAWS. He booted up his dusty laptop, searching, scanning through pages of legalese. Section 8, Lawn Maintenance. Section 12, Exterior Paint. Section 14, Meetings and Member Challenges. A glimmer of something radical. Any member may, by petition with support from 20% of households, challenge or seek to amend standing board enforcement actions. Petition must be reviewed at a public forum within 30 days. A loophole hidden in plain sight. Jim raced to share this at a hastily called meeting in Carl's garage. Neighbors packed in, buzz flickering in the humid air. We have rights in the charter they're counting on us not knowing, Jim announced, holding up copies of Section 14. If we file a petition, they'll have to listen. If we show up in numbers, we won't be easy to ignore. Nadia's eyes flared. We get enough names, we force a public hearing. The mood shifted from dread to cautious hope. Papers spread across the workbench, signatures gathered steadily. On the street, more flags went up, red, white, blue, and borrowed. But within hours, the board retaliated. They dispatched uniformed private security, snapping photos of homes, jotting down license plates. The HOA's attorney posted an online warning. Attempts to obstruct enforcement may result in legal action. Intimidation ramped up. Fines doubled. Some neighbors grew silent, glancing away as Jim passed. Yet petitions kept stacking up, and late that evening, Nadia slipped the final sheet into Jim's hand. We have the numbers. But as Jim prepared the forms for official submission, he spotted Lisa Mayers and 2 board members pacing outside his house, voices hushed, faces storm-dark in his porch light. He locked the front door, hands sweaty. The board could stall, twist, or break their own rules, but they'd underestimated a father's resolve. He wasn't sure what war he'd signed on to, but with neighbors behind him and a loophole to test, giving up was no longer an option. What neither side realized yet, standing beneath that battered flag, was that their fight was about to become very public. Who would be the first to make a move neither could take back? The next morning, a soft knock roused Jim before sunrise. Carl stood on the step, eyes blazing. It's time. They loaded the signed petitions, all 78 in battered manila folders, the official language staring up in block letters. Nadia joined them, clutching a thermos of coffee, determination burning through fatigue. The HOA office sat at the edge of the development, all glass and manicured shrubs. 3 board members huddled under an awning, faces slack as Jim's group approached. Lisa looked up, eyes flicking from one neighbor to the next. "Can I help you?" Jim held out the petitions. "We're invoking Section 14. You have 30 days to call a public forum." She glanced at the signatures, then at the faces behind Jim, older men, single mothers, even a few teenagers. Her lips pressed thin. "There are proper channels for this," she began, but Carl cut her off. "They're your channels, we're following them." Lisa hesitated, mask cracking for a heartbeat. "The board will review this and respond in writing." As they left, the crowd swelled. Neighbors drawn by phone alerts, Facebook posts, the buzz of something unprecedented. Jim's phone vibrated nonstop. Reporters wanted comment, veterans groups chimed in, posts went viral. By sunset, board members pushed back with a slick email blast. Unauthorized gathering. Action outside established processes subject to additional fines. The threat felt hollow with so many signatures already collected. But not everyone felt brave. Some neighbors, blindsided by press attention, asked their names to be struck from the list. Others panicked, afraid of more legal fallout. Still, the momentum rolled. Carl created an official event page for the forum, daring the board to ignore it. Nadia coordinated volunteers, planning signs and speeches, determined to remind anyone watching what the flagpole stood for. Jim, spinning with nerves, paced his living room. Mark's photo watched from the shelf, a silent anchor. The board had 30 days to comply, but would they try to sabotage or stall? Would they play fair or twist the fight in some new way? Night fell rich with tension. The next phase, for better or worse, was set to begin. And outside, the flags snapped in the wind, as if refusing to be silenced. By Monday morning, local stations rolled up in battered news vans, satellite dishes blooming from their roofs. Cameras panned across rows of flagpoles, bright against muted homes. Reporters cornered neighbors, notebooks snapping open with each quoted outrage. The board tried to circle the wagons, sending out a measured press release. The HOA respects all who serve, but must uphold agreed-upon aesthetic standards. The statement sounded hollow even to board loyalists. Jim kept a wary eye on it all, knowing one wrong word could tilt public sympathy. The press wanted a hero, his grief made that easy, but Jim wasn't doing this for himself. A journalist gently asked, "Why risk so much?" Jim, heart in his throat, told her about Mark. How the poll was a promise, not a political stunt. "You can follow the rules and still lose your soul," he said. The line hit the 6 o'clock news, broadcast through a haze of neighborhood drama and American flags. As more media outlets jumped in, regional, national, even podcast crews, neighbors found themselves in the spotlight. Some basked in the attention, others hid behind curtains, tired of the scrutiny. The board doubled down, scrambling to retain a public relations firm. Spokespeople issued emotional statements, nodding solemnly at Mark's sacrifice and immediately pivoting back to uniformity obligations. But as interviews stacked up and social media raged, pressure built in ways the board never predicted. Veterans organizations weighed in. Elected officials tweeted statements of support, tagging the HOA. Jim's phone wordlessly pinged with interview requests, some pleading for a sound bite with the father. He felt unsteady but kept his gaze on the purpose, Mark's face. Not spectacle, but memory. The next neighborhood association email was frantic. "Unauthorized media presence will not be tolerated. Residents are encouraged not to engage with outside parties." Neighbors shrugged. Some organized a flag-raising ceremony for the press, sending a wave of red, white, and blue across the lawns. The board planned their own press conference, carefully staged. But every question spun back to Jim's grief, Mark's legacy, and the HOA's inflexible rules. Behind closed doors, Jim heard whispers. Some board members now questioned whether this was worth the battle. Not all of them wanted their names dragged through headlines. All the while, new threats brewed: court dates, liens, retaliation. The storm raged louder, and still neither side seemed ready to blink. But when the date for the public forum finally arrived, the entire town was ready. Would the board dare to show up? The night of the forum arrived, humid and breathless. The community hall overflowed, neighbors shoulder to shoulder, news cameras trained on every speaker, the air buzzing with anticipation and fear. Folded chairs clattered as extras were rushed out. Flags adorned the walls, some neighbors standing silently with hands over their hearts while others pressed signs to their chests. Honor our fallen, neighbors before bureaucracy. Let Jim keep his flag. Jim sat front row, surrounded by allies and strangers alike. At the makeshift dais, Lisa Mayers and the rest of the board looked drawn, shadows beneath their eyes. The board's attorney perched beside them, papers fanned across the table. The moderator, a retired judge from the neighborhood, called the meeting to order. The bylaws' language was read aloud, petition signatures confirmed. Lisa cleared her throat, her voice wavering as she launched into a defense of the community's visual harmony. Skeptical murmurs rippled across the crowd. The mood was restless, ready to listen but not to be swayed. Jim's turn arrived. He stood, voice shaking, before steadying. The flag isn't about breaking rules. It's about remembering my son. It's about all the people on this block who want to live with dignity. This is our home, not a subdivision from a catalog. Applause rose, quick and fierce. Carl shared his own story, followed by Nadia and a chorus of neighbors echoing the same plea: keep the memorial, respect the grief. Don't let a rule erase what really matters. Opponents rose, too. 2 or 3 residents spoke of precedent, of slippery slope. But the room's mood shifted under the weight of so many voices. Media lights flickered and blinked, catching every tear, every trembling hand. Lisa, visibly rattled, tried to steer the conversation back to policy. But the attorney's face betrayed worry. He'd read the room. As the night deepened, the moderator called for a vote to formally suspend enforcement pending review. The ayes thundered, the nays scattered and weak. But the board, cornered, promised only to take the comments under advisement. No decision, no closure, just a new promise to deliberate and revisit. Jim slumped in his chair, frustrated. The victory felt incomplete, hanging by a thread. As the crowd dispersed, a board member slipped Jim a note: meet me tomorrow, alone. Questions clanged in Jim's mind. Had something shifted, or was another trap being set? Nothing was finished yet, not by a long shot. Without sleeping, Jim replayed the forum in his mind, picking apart every gesture, every silence. Now that the board was forced to pause, uncertainty coiled in the air, and so did an opening for something bigger. The next morning, Jim followed the board member's request, meeting at a picnic table at the edge of the park. He recognized her, Rebecca, the only board member who hadn't tried to look away during last night's testimony. Rebecca slid a copy of the bylaws across the table, a red folder with tabs and sticky notes. Most of them don't actually care about the aesthetics, she murmured. They're just scared that if they bend the rule once, they'll lose all control. Jim leaned in, senses prickling. So what now? She glanced around. Section 16, under Historical and Memorial Displays, was never repealed. It predates the Unified Code by a decade. If the flagpole is certified as a memorial, they have no grounds. They just never assumed anyone would notice. Hope flickered. Can you help prove it? She nodded, but her fear was real. Bring documentation, pictures, newspaper articles, service records, make it public. Force their hand at the next meeting. Jim hesitated, worried about pulling Rebecca into the crossfire. She only said, "This is the part they never tell you about HOAs. They can't handle sunlight. Our rules only work if no one asks questions." By dusk, Jim's friends scoured the bylaws. Nadia contacted local veterans groups. Carl spread word about the new discovery. Files arrived from all over. Marked service records, obituaries, news clippings, photos from the day the flagpole was raised. Rival board members scrambled. Anonymous emails circulated, some threatening legal countersuits, others admitting they'd had enough. The petition grew, allies multiplied. Media attention didn't fade. The board had pushed too hard. Now their own rules, once weapons, were about to become their undoing. But as the next meeting approached, Rebecca warned, they may try to rewrite the rules or manipulate the vote. Watch everything, document it all. Jim nodded, hope rousing in his chest, but dread clinging alongside it. Would this new evidence be enough? Or would the board double down, twisting the rules once again? Either way, the script was changing. The silent would no longer stay silent, but who would make the first move? The HOA, seeing their grip slipping, filed an emergency motion seeking an injunction against Jim and his growing block of supporters. Notices arrived with urgent red stamps. Appear in court, respond or lose property rights. The courtroom was not made for big heroes, just bored clerks intimidating silence, rows of pew-like benches. The judge, a grave woman with silver hair, called the case, her eyes barely flicking to the crowd. Reporters filled the back wall. Carl and Nadia flanked Jim, hearts in their throats. Lisa Mayers, flanked by two lawyers, laid out the HOA's case. Violation of community standards, repeated noncompliance, documented refusal to follow direct orders. Every precedent supports our authority. The lawyers belabored their point until the judge frowned. And the defense? Jim rose, not a lawyer, just a father. But with him stood Rebecca, now holding the red folder, evidence of Section 16 and proof of Mark's memorial. They stacked photos, award citations, the original HOA newsletters mentioning memorial displays. Jim read from Mark's eulogy, voice catching but proud. Rebecca, voice steady, cited the bylaws verbatim. No enforcement action shall inhibit any certified memorial display as defined by board charter, Section 16. A gasp rippled through the court. The HOA lawyer objected, called it outdated. But Rebecca revealed emails showing the clause remained valid, unused yet never revoked. The judge read, eyes narrowing. Outside, the courthouse steps teemed with media. Tweets lit up #Justice for Mark trending as the session dragged into afternoon. Carl leaned in, whispering, "You did it, Jim. They can't hide anymore." But the judge wasn't ready to rule. She demanded both sides submit follow-up briefs on the history and application of Section 16. "No decision today," she declared. "You'll hear my answer in writing." Relief mixed with dread, no closure yet, just more waiting. But when the board lawyer shouldered his bag, face pale, Jim saw something new, fear. This was no longer about one flagpole. The whole power structure teetered. Outside, Rebecca muttered, "They'll launch a last-minute counterattack." Jim squeezed her hand, knowing the end was close. Or so he thought. Weeks inched by, tension wound tight enough to hum at the edges of every day. Then, at sunrise on a quiet Friday, an envelope arrived, this one heavy, the county seal affixed. Jim tore it open with trembling hands. The judge's decision, Section 16 stood. The flagpole now and in the future was protected. Relief buckled his knees, tears wetting his cheeks before he realized he was crying. Carl and Nadia rushed to his porch, news spreading like dawn itself. More neighbors joined, hugs and high fives breaking through months of anxiety. The board, battered, called an emergency meeting. Lisa, voice shaking, announced amendments, removing fines for certified memorials, rewriting enforcement practices, adding a new emphasis on public review and transparency. But as victory swelled, Jim faced a new landscape. The neighborhood was changed, relationships strained, trust broken and stitched up with shaky intention. Some board loyalists resigned, others apologized haltingly in odd moments at the mailbox. Rebecca, now regarded as both hero and traitor, quietly declined re-election. "It can't just be one person," she told Jim. "The rules belong to everybody now." The flags remained, more visible than ever. At dusk, a crowd lingered beneath Jim's pole, saluting Mark and all the memories that could finally rest in sunlight. Yet even celebration felt complicated. Would peace last? How long until the next battle, new rules, new faces, old grudges? For now, Jim clung to a moment of quiet. The flag snapped against blue sky, the house felt less lonely. Mark's memory, once nearly erased by bureaucracy, stood tall. But as the dust settled and cameras turned away, unanswered questions lingered. How many more small battles smoldered beneath the surface in places just like this? And who might need someone to stand tall the next time? The rules tried to bury what mattered most. If this story moved you, share it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories where justice, courage, and community collide. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment where the little guy stands tall. We'll see you in the next one.